All right, now let's return to studio for perspective and analysis of the president's speech, what you could have missed and what you ought to take in as far as it is concerned. Honorable Fred Mukasa Mbidde, a former EALA MP, is with us this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, my brother.
Welcome to the program too.
Thank you very much.
Usual suspect.
Thank you for having us.
Honorable Captain Francis
Babu. Bilingual. You speak
No, I spoke a bit of French with the gentleman who was here. I told him, bienvenue at NTV.
I wanted to hear Runyuri. Why?
You want to hear, okay?
Yeah, because when you speak our local languages, it's also bilingual.
Yeah, very, very much.
Why must it French, English?
Yisuhoshe Captain Francis Babu.
Oh, that's very nice.
Kusanga liemba henyene.
Yeah, you see? This is the kind of thing I want to hear.
All right. Captain,
yes.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the State of the Nation address, whether it lived up to the billing, let's take an aspect that was, of course, hovering over the State of the Nation address, the health of the president.
Yes. Well, he told us. The good thing about President Museveni, he doesn't seem to hide anything. He was very kind. He told us that they had done 2 tests. They had done the other one, which is a quick one, and they had done a second one. Second one was negative, but the third one was virtually positive. So he's going to confirm later on.
No, I think the Permanent Secretary and the Minister of Health confirmed late in the night that it was actually positive. Yeah,
and by the way, that is very good of him, because the more the president can talk about the COVID and other illnesses, it's good for the rest of the country to know that actually this thing is still around. There's a lot of codes going on, and a lot of people have taken it for granted. People are not, they don't look after themselves. I think everybody should actually try, when you get a cold, to make sure that it's not COVID. COVID can really become a nuisance. And COVID comes in different forms. There's the cold, then there is the one which comes in like a fever. You get joint pains, you get, and for the elderly, it is really, it can take you very fast. So to me, I'd like to thank the president for having really admitted and for having told us what he had done. I saw somebody say, oh, there's too much money testing people. No, I think the more we test, the more we're sure what is going on, the better. Our health is very, very important. And one time I had a very bad cold, so I asked somebody if they could do the test. Luckily it was not COVID. But we should check. We should make sure that we check ourselves. Okay. And we should take care of ourselves. We need everybody. We don't need. And by the way, you should say that my condolences go to the family of Katorwama for having passed on. This is the performing industry. That's lost somebody who is very, very dear to all of us. Thank you very much.
Of course, being a former member of parliament and one that immediate former member of parliament, because he was in the previous, you have your sentiments on his works and his legacy, but on the president's COVID now, not dilemma. Yes. If he hadn't talked about it and then news comes out in another way, it would be something that would put us on tenterhooks, but he was able to come out like Captain says. What's your take on that?
Yes, just like Honorable Captain Francis Babu, I would also similarly send condolences to the family and friends of the late Honorable Kato Lubwama. As the Vice President of DP, I would tell you, he stood independent last, but generally DP leaning, because he's a member of the Democratic Party, and his family is equally the same. We have lost, of course, that points to whether or not we really have an act for treatment and the life of senior citizens in Uganda. Most of them die without even capacity to buy a single tablet. About the president's health, very unfortunate. Because we need to legislate on senior citizens. Their capacity to depart from us should be commensurate with the kind of, because you know, Nyerere the late one time said that the problem with it, when he was fighting capitalism, he called it hoarding, economic hoarding. That when you begin to invest and keep money and save, you are hoarding. But please work for society to the extent that by the time you can no longer work, society works for you. Now, we must do a hybrid, taking care of senior citizens. Number two, about the health of the president. Of course, we wish him quick recovery. There is a pointer in terms of that. We are extremely sluggish as the East African community on the establishment of the industry for production of vaccines against the COVID-19. We know that the president will not feel it so much because he's vaccinated, but we have now a world of population in East Africa that has not been vaccinated. In my opinion, I think we must, the joint effort between Rwanda and Senegal, I think, should be supported for East African purposes so that we can have industries that can produce vaccines and Ugandans will be safe despite catching such flus. Yes.
All right, I think that is very reassuring, especially when it comes to a time like this that many Ugandans might be grappling with ailments that they might not fully understand. Whether it's a cold, do not consider it as lightly as you would consider a cold in the years before 2019. What you're watching there are some of the pictures that came through as preparations were underway to listen to the president last evening, Wednesday afternoon, so to speak, because that event went straight into the evening hours of the day. We shall be looking at the misses and what was put to the light, especially when it comes to projections on the growth of the economy. The positives are what we want to delve on. During the discussions, the negatives will also rear their ugly head, but I was told one time that pessimism is a very high price, one that you should never flirt with. But as a journalist, I have no choice. Growth attributed to economic stability as a result of low inflation, establishment of more manufacturing plants. This is a conversation that the president has often outed in many of his speeches. Industries, and manufacturing is at the heart of that. Allow me welcome the Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, the Communications Director at the National Resistance Movement Secretariat, to the program. You found us underway. A very warm welcome, Honorable.
Thank you very much, and good morning, our viewers. And good morning, my fellow panelists.
Yes.
I also wish to join you to commiserate with the family of the late Lubwama and all those the president mentioned, and even those that he didn't. It is sad to lose dear ones, but we believe it is the will of God when it happens.
That's
because
right.
It only happens when God allows it to. May their souls rest in peace.
All right. As spokesperson of the National Resistance Movement, Executive Director of Communications, so to speak, we want to hear about the president's health, the chairman's health, rather.
No, the chairman should be well. He said they obtained they did a number of tests. One returned positive, one returned negative. And to be more cautious, you may want to take the consideration of the positive in order to prevent.
That's right.
Should the confirmation come when to say it is positive, then you have taken precautionary measures. That should confirm the Ugandans why, even when COVID was declared not a serious public health, people should know that it is real and it does exist. If it doesn't fear presidents, it may not fear you too. So we should be cautious and careful, because that's exactly what the president has been telling us all along. I haven't heard from him since morning, but the quiet in the country shows that all is well.
All right. I've dealt so much of that because the reassurances are needed, especially when it comes to the running of a government and a country like Uganda. Honorable Fred Mukasa Mbidde, I would like to get your take on the State of the Nation address. As a layman from Butaleja, the State of the Nation is literally the state of my well-being as an individual. When the president comes to tell me what my state is, and he might, of course, be on point, he might not be on point. In your view, was he?
Yeah, I believe, of course, largely he was, I would say. There are material factors that were not completely addressed. For example, when he addressed security, in my opinion, of course, there is a spate of death that includes suicides that needs to be addressed in the country. We need the objective reasons that make it a logical necessity for one to kill somebody and kill himself. I think there must be a study, because it is ongoing. It is continuous. It is becoming the order of the day. And I think that is something that should be addressed. There is something that we need to address in terms of the involvements of our national army, in terms of all, because first of all, what we are doing is very good for security purposes. But the recoupment mechanism for what we are doing, the contingent procedures that would definitely now act in such a way that the country's economy is not overloaded with the kind of course, what would even begin to seem imperialist in nature. I think there must be attendant processes that economically address the jumps that have been created with the spending that has been occasioned in terms of our external processes and procedures. We could be a country that responds quickly, but at the same time, we must be an economy that knows what we are doing. So when you, and what am I saying? Most countries that engage in external security processes accompany such engagements with their own economic procedures. For example, when you go to Central African Republic, and you are the country that has actually even taken charge of security of that country because they have failed to do so, there must be an attendant company that takes care of investments that definitely now recoups the expenditure that you have done in terms of defense. That way you are not overloading the consumer in Uganda with the kind of jumps that have been created in terms of forex stock, in terms of volume of production, and in terms of, because the economy in Uganda is at the back of every Ugandan to carry. Government doesn't have businesses. We have a government that really doesn't engage much in work. It is a government that taxes people. Now, when a government taxes people, the meaning is that the consumer is the one carrying the load of what is actually being loaded. So, I want a process that must be engaged in by government. We establish a venture procedure, a company that can take up business in terms of the countries where we have had, other than the liberal economics that exists. For example, when you are taking charge of South Sudan, we know that there is liberal economics that has been taken care of. But at the same time, we must be a government that knows how to take charge in terms of investments, engaged in by a substantive government entity, in terms of construction of roads, in terms of this, in terms of, so that money comes back. Because we know that South Sudan, for example, has got its major commodity, which is oil. With all, of course, the international commodity price volatilities. But at the same time, what is Uganda benefiting directly and also indirectly in terms of markets? Directly would be the one constructing all road systems in South Sudan. There must be a Ugandan company engaged in that. We cannot continue to run a government that doesn't work, because that is a government that will not take care of price rises. The volatilities in terms of prices here in a liberal economy can only be organized by establishing competitive businesses between the government and the local investor. So, for me, I think the state of the nation needed to also address that. But I was happy when they addressed, of course, the interventions in terms of poverty reduction, when he addressed the PDM, Myoga. But what he needed to tell us is that actually these two programs are overloaded. You know,
We shall be coming to the
Yes.
nitty-gritty of the PDM
So-
and all these initiatives that are aimed at improving the livelihood of the Ugandan.
Yes.
You seem to suggest, though you gave us a very veiled statement on the cost of Somalia initiatives,
We are
especially the
at a loss.
fact
Yes.
that the UPDF is involved. We shall be coming to that later. Let me first get the misses and perhaps what the President got right in the eyes of Captain Francis Babu.
Well, first and foremost, this is a constitutional requirement that now and then the president has to come and tell us what the health of this country looks like. To me, he's like a doctor. He's got a stethoscope, he puts on Uganda and tells us what he's suffering from. We have the political, the economic, and the social areas.
That's right.
Now, the problem is that we tend to waste our time on symptoms rather than talking about the source of our problem. People talk about this, talk about that one, but what is the problem? What is the political problem? What is the economic problem? What is the social conditions? Now, the president uses this as a vehicle to tell you what his manifesto, how far it has gone,
That's
what
right.
they are planning to do, and so on and so forth, which is extremely good. The first question would be, what is our political health like? What is the temperature? How is our politics in Uganda? What is our politics in the region? What is our politics internationally, globally? And then comes the economy. What is the economy? What is the global economy like? How does it impact on the regional economy? How does it impact on our economy? Lastly, Uganda. What are our problems economically? He did go into that and the details. He didn't talk about the social conditions, health. He's talked about education. And of course, we talk about agriculture and so on and so forth. I'm very happy that the honorable member did talk about a company. We do have a company. It's called Uganda Development Corporation. And for many, many years, it was... And by the way, it's a very good idea. And I'm very happy he brought it up. The UDC idea was such a fantastic idea that if you went to Israel today, and you went to places like Singapore, there are areas where the private sector cannot endeavor, but government can. For example, in Israel, a lot of very, very big things like aviation and manufacturing of certain things, like the computer world, the government of Israel has put in a lot of money, and they have formed big companies, and in fact they are now reaping the fruits of their local companies which have formed these organizations. Now, what I am interested in, all the good things the president said, I accept. I have no problem with those. My problem is, first of all, what is our reserve? How much money do we have? Now, reserve tells you that you are still, there. That's number one. Number two, how much are we putting into our government? How much are we bringing in terms of money? He gave us, of course, a list of things that we've been selling, and I was very impressed. Even maize,
There's been significant growth of exports,
and all these things that are bringing in money. Now I want to know where that money comes in, but I want more than that. When the president was talking, the expenditure, yes, we know everybody is a lot of expenditure, but how much is coming in? What happened to our cobalt? What is happening to our marble? What's happening to in eastern Uganda? We are now, I'm told, we are getting coltan. What are we talking about? I'm talking about tin. I'm talking about copper. I'm talking about gold. I'm told we have a big reserve of gold.
We are a leading gold
this
exporter.
is very important. But I want UDC to get a company to excavate that gold, make ingots, put them in the Bank of Uganda. We don't need Fort Knox in America. We need Fort Knox here. We need to know that we've got money in our bank. I want us to put in money, and then we talk about the expenditure. When there's money in the pocket, it is easier to talk how to spend that money.
That's right.
The president talked about oil, that when our oil comes. No. I want that oil. We already know. We know where you're going. But I want to talk about tungsten. I want to talk about cobalt. I want us to talk about gold. I want us to talk about iron and all these things. Where are we on those ones? UDC. What can UDC do to make sure that we exploit all these? I want to know a little bit more. The social conditions you talked about were perfect. We need to put in money we need to look at health. We need to look at education. We need to impress everybody that, oh, everybody's running away from the private school. It's now going to the government schools because we are putting in more money. No, that's good. Very nice. He's talking about agriculture. We've got tractors, we've bought those. And the next thing is, how is the management of those? I think I need to know a little bit more about how they are going to be managed. I want to know that the former minister, the former member of parliament here, how will the tractor go to his farm? And who is going to supervise it? Who is going to manage it? These are things that we can find out later. Our politics.
Very quickly.
We have failed to sit down in a multi-party dispensation and discuss. We started something called iPod. We scattered it. How can we get together so that we can talk about politics in the country? How can we sit down and dialogue? We can't sit here and hope that things will happen automatically. No, we've heard of the elderly forum, we've heard of the religious forum. I want us to talk about politics. If you put a torch there, has the multi-party dispensation worked? So those are the questions I want to put forward, and I would have that would have come in the state of the nation.
All right, Captain, that is very telling. But let me go to Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. Listening to Honorable Mbidde and Captain Francis Babu, you get the feeling that the president's speech was state of the NRM party in terms of manifesto and how good he's going on that.
My friend, the NRM party has a constitution and has structures on how it must handle its affairs. I've listened to a number of speeches by His Excellency the President on the state of the nation. This one was a little bit more comprehensive than the previous one. You may want to note that at the time he gave the previous statement, he even started with a biblical quotation. And Uganda was going through a very strenuous economic condition. The prices were rising, people were losing jobs, imports were scarce, and we had a bigger problem. And many people were clamoring for subsidies, for subventions to help the people who were stressed. And this created a huge problem that could have created stress within the spheres of government, and you could see it in the president's speech at the last time. The speech this time was the contrast. Even when he was indisposed, he really gave hope, and he was happy, he was robust. He was telling people prices are going down. We stuck to the right economic measures, and because of that, we're not suffering like other countries. And if we continue like this, we are going to reap these benefits. Hearing from my colleagues who have been to Parliament before, you know that the President covering all those, as you mentioned them in detail, would have required perhaps a full day or a week. But given the time that the President had, he basically had to touch on those he felt were very important. But even then, you could also hear him disagreeing with some of the things that were written in his own speech. You see, that shows you that he has the technocratic side, but he has now himself as the president of Uganda, the way he feels the country. But I also know that the president was cognizant of the fact that soon after this, we are going to have the budget speech. And this is going to be in a week's time from now, where he will have the opportunity to talk about the reserves, the state of debt, and the level and health of the financial flows, and what are the deficit between our incomes and what we send outside. When the president does that, then the members of parliament should help us to dissect this statement. Now, Francis Babu, I want to tell you that the parliament you used to be in and the way you used to debate, how I wish that the issues you raised now was the quality of debate that we are going to expect on the floor of parliament, for people to ask the hard questions. Because there are people who think that when the president speaks or when the government gives a position, some of those tough questions may not be asked. Because, for instance, I know President Museveni is patriotic. In the 1970s, when he was still a young man, he flew to Mozambique to go and learn fighting and to go and fight. There was no company that sent him there to reap economic benefit. But his idea was ideological, that how do we liberate Africa? When Mwalimu Nyerere chose to be a frontline state, and he came here to support Uganda to liberate us from Amin, there was no company following that this one is going to Uganda to trade. These were patriotic Ugandans and Pan-Africanists who wanted to liberate the continent of Africa. So we must not put a mismatch between the ideological political views that should consolidate Africa into becoming one continent. Like you has been in the Pan-African Parliament, my colleague, you know that if this Africa was one state, we would be a very big market, would be a very strong nation, and would be having enough resources. And nobody would be joking with us. They would be negotiating with us as equals.
Yeah.
But now they fragmented us, that when they want to deal with you, they isolate you as a small individual state. That is what pains President Museveni. But coming to the state of the nation, there were things that really impressed me there. I'm a farmer. You know, in Puerto Rico we try to do some agriculture even when the land is small. But one of the things that has been hitting us hardest is the cost of fertilizers. This time I did maize, some good acreage. But when I looked at the cost of fertilizers and I was estimating and computing what would be the selling price, I don't know whether I will be able to recoup the money that I have put in the agriculture. That is very costly. But the president did address that, to say if we must, then we must evaluate and see whether we must provide subsidy for fertilizers. I've heard Kenya has done that, and a number of countries are already doing that. When he does that, that will enhance productivity in order to increase food security. There is something that is not properly discussed and contextualized.
Very quickly, Honorable.
If you looked at Uganda and you went to the community in the villages, and you see how people eat food, just imagine if we were like other countries who import food. Would we be able to handle? But there is a very big gap that is covered by the peasant farmers and the people who are involved in production. They do a lot of production, and government, when government funds the socio-economic strata in order to transform them, he helps them to stand on 2 feet and to bring them in the money economy and increase their purchasing power. And in so doing, at one time Uganda will be able to collect enough taxes and do some of the things that we want them to do.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for your overview of the State of the Nation address. I'm sure each of you captures it from your vantage point. When the president spoke about initiatives that are aimed at, for example, improving economic growth, he has his own targets, 7%. He disagreed with the fact that the Minister of Finance puts it at 5%. That speaks of the fact that perhaps in the management of the economy that is Uganda, we seem to be having competing ideas that are not finding common ground for us to be able to go forward. Honorable Mbidde, when the president seems to suggest that there might be some disagreement on which models we can adopt with the Minister of Finance, technocrats, where does that leave us?
One, of course, you heard how Honorable Dombo addressed himself on the material, particular that Honorable Francis had raised. The gold reserves. By the way, gold is not just a simple commodity. The weight of a currency, the value of a currency can be based on the reserves of gold that we have, and that is termed as a fiduciary issue. Now, when the reserves are not quantified, we are left with just one alternative. The stability of the shilling now is based on the interventions in terms of crop promotion. And that is where we have the Operation Wealth Creation. We have had this stability for almost 3 years against the dollar. And that is what has generally kept our forest stock better than Kenya and better than probably any other country. Now, you cannot calculate an economy based on something where interventions are minimal. When you leave And this is where we want to elaborate. It has to be extensive, really. The president may not need to gloss over material things that require thoroughness of address when you are addressing the state of the nation. So this is what I can tell you. The interventions, what are they? Because the interventions you want to make must be needs-based and field-tested. So what is the assessment in terms of the basis? For example, the intervention is in terms of microfinance. When poverty is attacking society, it goes through a multiplicity of methods. It is methodical, by the way. And when you are eradicating it, you must equally also address it using a multiplicity of models. That is the economics. So for you to use the two models to address poverty that has attacked a country for a long period of time, using a multiplicity of methods, others traditional, others gender-based, others age-based. Well, why am I saying this? Because the young people spend almost 15 years in school without provision of any labor, no income. Now, the kind of poverty now, getting people up to 16 years of age are age-based. So where is the economic model that addresses that poverty? Number two, women work 12 hours from morning to sunset, and for them they earn no income. Their job is actually called domestic chores. So now there is that poverty, that is gender-based. So there must be an economic model aimed at addressing it. Yes. There are those that are traditional-based. So I can tell you that two models can't do much. And that is why you find people saying Myoga has not worked, PDM has not worked, because they don't even know how you generally get towards how much they have worked. It has to be field tested. You must fail in the field, but you must be consistent. Then you come at what has happened to the whole world. After the lockdowns, for example, what would this country, because now I am addressing the needs-based, what would every country do in terms of interventions? What happened during lockdowns? All the micro-investors ate their capital. Those that were dealing with the sacks of charcoal, 3, that was a capital of 210,000 shillings. They were locked down for 2 years, and I can tell you that that was capital and it was eaten. So we needed to adopt what we call the quantitative easing methods. Now, that is where I now put physical capital in the hands of the micro-investors. But what did Parliament do over the time? They actually applauded when the president told them that we have recapitalized Uganda Development Bank. Now, micro-investors can't access anything from Uganda Development Bank. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the collateral, they can't. So now that was not to address their plight. So it is a period of after 2 years that now you deliver PDM. The scramble for PDM now, material will be addressing the consumption economy. It immediately, whether you like it or not, it will be the consumption economy. Now, the issue of subsidies, like that Honorable Dombo has talked about, in terms of fertilizers, is good. But what is the macro policy of Uganda in terms of addressing our own, the World Trade Organization programs? Our positions are contradictory. When you look at the Singapore issues, saying we must, because I can tell you that what the president has said, we will depart from it at Cancun. Because when the Singapore issues arise, and that is where, and the Doha issues, and I have seen ministers parting from laid out course of Africa simply because the United States has advised them to do so, has advised the government to depart from what actually benefits us. When you look at the African Continental Free Trade Area, that Honorable Dombo has been talking about, how we must now Africanize our own trade zones. Of the 500 global companies, there is no African company. 500 global companies. But we have the Dangotes, we have the Escoms, we have MTN, we have... That is why we are coming up with what Honorable Babu is saying. If we have venture capital companies for each nation states, and they adopt a conglomerate, I think we can generate one single company that will at least be the 501st company to enroll amongst the list of global companies. Now, until we do that, we are going to remain. For example, he addressed also, you remember, he's very happy with integration. I've been a member of the East African Legislative Assembly. But if every country begins to run its own airline, they begin to jostle for routes. You sit in an aircraft with 10 people. The amount of money payable is only effectual in refilling that aircraft to go back to its origin, country of origin. Instead of generating an East African community airline, they can't pay for a captain like Emmanuel Francis Babu to fly it.
Captain Francis Babu is retired and very comfortable.
Yes, but even if we wanted, I don't think Uganda Airlines can pay for his flights, given his miles.
All right.
So I am saying, I think we need now to be practical in terms of what we intend to do.
I think, like Honorable Dombo said, the president might actually need a whole day to explain a state of the nation, to get to those details of the how and the what is being pursued in as far as economic models are concerned. But he was very emphatic yesterday about value creation, value addition, not only in coffee, but just about all the other products within the country.
But who is adding?
Because he's convinced that if we can begin at that level, add value to just about every export.
That's a good concept.
Captain,
but value addition, let me ask you one thing.
Yes.
The president is a farmer. Tell me frankly, on the panel here, he's a farmer, he has cattle, and some of them are for beef. But all his cows leave the kraal, get to Kampala with their horns and skins. Tell me whether there is any of his farms where cattle leave his farms as tinned beef. Because he must be the example.
Interesting.
Of modernization of. So I am telling you, when we say he will not cover that, he doesn't have the time, but he has 5 years.
Perhaps he doesn't have the capacity because
if we knew they are being done, we wouldn't raise them as a question.
There are businessmen who have the capacity to add value. Do you see the president's model, value addition, just about for every product, including perhaps even services, can work for us in the short term?
I have a problem with the modern Africans. I think we have two people in one state. We have the elite and we have the ordinary person.
Yep.
The elite talk a lot of very beautiful things, economics from Harvard, London University. They talk about, all these nice things. They've got statistics. They are not bringing their brothers and sisters on board. There's a disconnect. You talk of good things, you go to Parliament, you talk Queen's English beautifully. But we are not implementing what we say. It stays on paper. We are talking about models that don't seem to be managed. What we need to do now, and we are talking about the state of the nation. I'm not going to talk about the details of the economy and so on and so forth.
That's right.
Our people yesterday, when the State of the Nation was read, how many of them understood what was read? How many people in my village?
One professor told me, actually he's a US professor, that actually what he has seen in Uganda is that voters are in leadership and the real leaders are on media houses explaining to the population.
Please finish up. We need to go for a break and then return and finalize.
Okay, one of the things I would like to see in the State of the Nation, I want to find out a way how we can bring everybody on board so that they can take part. Yesterday when the State of the Nation, because you see, you talk about the State of the Nation, the President will be opening Parliament next week. Then there is the budget, right? All these are going to be very good, they're going to give us all the details.
That's right.
We're going to have guys who have been to Harvard and London University and Makerere University. They're going to talk about the budget in the most modern way. The question is, that man and woman, he was talking about the man who was looking for fertilizer. Does he understand what you're saying? Does a Ugandan, all these good things you've signed, you've done them, you've put them there. 1 year later, we're still talking about Emyoga, we're still talking about PDM, we're still talking. There's a one man in Bangladesh, Professor Yunus, who did microfinance, and every poor man and woman gets money from that bank. That's PDM. The same thing in Korea. The question is, how do we bring everybody on board?
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to go for a break. When we return, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo will tell us how we can get everybody on board, because he is a communications director, and perhaps the president will be communicating the things in the speeches that shall be coming up, especially a budget speech. Do stay with us. We shall be coming back to wrap this up.
Watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back. We're glad you're still with us. You're watching Morning at NTV, and it's the Kickstarter discussion where we are getting to know opinion and, of course, reaction to the President's State of the Nation address yesterday. Like I promised, as we were going into the break, I'll begin with Honorable Emmanuel Dombo on the President's communication strategy. Captain Francis Babu is dismayed that the president talks to the elite when he's supposed to communicate to the layman. And perhaps that could be responsible for aspects like the misunderstandings around implementation of the parish development model. People are not aware what it's supposed to do. They think they're being given money, and that could be down to how it's communicated.
Being a president of a poor country is not an easy thing, I want to tell you. Just having a cross-section of the us here and the way we debate shows you the challenges the president that has. First of all, he must address people in a language they don't understand. That in itself is a challenge.
Yeah.
That is a problem that was solved in Tanzania and Kenya. When the president comes in Tanzania, he will talk and every person will hear and understand. Many of our people in Uganda, they will take the versions interpreted, which they will hear in talk shows from the politicians, the way they understood them.
And the propagandists.
And I want to tell you, like Honorable Francis Babu talked about the heat of the politics in the country. You should know that the president was giving this speech when the leader of the opposition and his team, who must provide leadership for the people, had boycotted the sitting of parliament. Those are the leaders you are talking about. Who must go, who come to parliament and earn money above 50 million, and they go and tell the people to boycott Myoga and boycott the parish development model. Those are the leaders that we have. Now the president must shoulder paying the unwilling and the uncompromising politicians, but must also save some money which must go to the transformation, the socio-economic transformation of the population. When you were in parliament, Mr. Babu, Honorable, you remember, there are things the president used to push, and you had even a vintage position because you're a member of cabinet.
Yes.
The president asked a fundamental question one day. He said, you are going to the public, ask your people, how do they live? Are they working and earning a salary? Or do they have something to sell? If you have neither of the two, how do you survive? When your child falls sick, that's why he said we must put enough money in immunization. Let's help the population to be okay. But coming to the economy, I want to respond to the question which was brought by my brother from Masaka, Honorable Mbidde, that the president brings his cows with all the horns and the cow dung. And
I didn't hear cow dung.
All right.
You know, one time the president invited an Egyptian meat exporter, and even constructed a factory around the Bombo Road.
Yes.
That's right.
We went and met him. We have a group of former members of parliament who are applying for land so that we can do some ranching and supply meat. That factory has the capacity of consuming 400 cows a day. And if it consistently works for 2 months, they will finish all the cattle in Uganda and there will be no cattle. So even if the president wanted to can, unless he will get a machine which can only skin 1 cow, in that place, that machine can skin a cow in just a flip of a second. So we must first of all address the quantities. I hear there is another company in Toroko already under construction, and I think may be commissioned soon, because now they are targeting where there are some few cows. We have been to the cattle corridor when we were in Chankwanzi, and the president took us around to see the transformation that is taking place. But even then, the quality of cows is not yet up to standard. The amount of milk and the way it is handled is not yet up to standard. And these are things that are going to be addressed. When you look at the parish involvement model, it has 7 pillars. Unfortunately, people have concentrated on the financial inclusion pillar. They are not talking about value addition. They are not talking about marketing and bulking. They are not talking about post-harvest handling and how you go there and see how people are milking when they're milking. Somebody squats under a cow, he milks. Then when the hands become wet, he cleans on the same cow. Then he starts milking more. And that's the quality of the milk you want to put in a machine so that you go and export. Those are the issues that must be addressed, but they are going to be addressed in the parish development model. So the challenges of the president start with the communication.
But the cap established doesn't benefit dairy farming.
Because right now the objective of PDM is inclusion, financial, to include the best poor of the poor who have been on the financial base, so that they come up. Because the other time I was in northern Uganda, and I saw the vast amounts of land. Northern Uganda will require a different intervention in order to enable the farmers who have bigger land to be able to utilize it. Because if you went to PDM and picked 1 million, how much can you do with 1 million?
Gentlemen,
if you have 100 acres of land?
something very interesting. You reveal what could be a very fundamental issue in the happenings behind the scenes when it comes to negotiations of who is coming to Uganda in terms of making huge investments. How we can miss the point that the factory we allow to be built and even launch can consume our cattle in the whole country within 2 months, but we still launch it. Now that means the advisory ecosystem behind that tells the president we are undertaking this needs, I don't know how to even describe it. There's should be another commission or a commission of inquiry to get us to understand exactly what is going on. But we don't have a lot of time. I will allow each of you 60 broadcasting seconds to do a wrap on what's the way forward. Will the president come again on the budget day and tell us the same statistics? Let's begin with you.
Of course, but you know what Honorable Dombo has raised. I don't know how, of course, the State of the Nation address shall be debated in Parliament, particularly by the absentees. and because we need results therefrom. What we are debating right now, we are advising those that expect implementation from us. So now I don't know, because we end up advising the people who expect us to be the answer. So we pose the questions to them. Number 2, I think we now need to address one thing, the volume of production in the agriculture sector. I think the time to address that is now. When the country adopts a method that does not zone the agriculture sector, for example, that means that we begin becoming a general in terms of the interventions we make. Now, when you are general, the meaning is that you are not specialized. The economy of Uganda by 1962 had been zoned. You knew that tobacco comes from West Nile, cotton from Bugisu, dairy farming from so you knew where your role should go if you were interested in matoke or cotton. Or today it can crisscross all of this, the length and width of districts, without being full of any commodity. Because now when you begin now adopting a general method of application, a general intervention method, you look like a madman who throws stones, but whatever you hit, you call it the target. Now volume is what we must address if we are to modernize. and commercialize agriculture.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbidde. Captain?
I'd like to thank the President for his... he did talk about LGBTQ towards the end, and he said something very nice. And by the way, I liked his approach. Unfortunately, he did not talk about the cheek of some members of the World Bank who stood up and were warning this country. I did not like that. Number two, IMF and World Bank, Bretton Woods Group should not turn around and start telling us what to do. Number two, I think United States, they are very good friends of ours. We've been very good friends with theirs. We have sent some of our people to go there and visit and go to the university. In fact, one of the advisors of President Obama was a Ugandan. You know, so really, with our good friendship, I think the United States should keep off our country. In terms of how we run our country, we have a lot of respect. I was reading in some papers, I see one of their NGOs was advertising that they are going to stop certain programs as a precursor to intimidating us. I think we are not going to intimidate.
Thank you very much, Captain. Honorable Dombo.
At the end of the President's speech yesterday, he summarized about 10 points. In the order of their, I think, importance, he talked about peace and security. He talked about Parish Development Board and the Myoga. He talked about rehabilitation of the railway, enhancement of the teaching of school of science in and medical hospitals, enhancement of tourism. All these are intended to do one thing. One, to create money in the pockets of the people, increase the purchasing power, and two, he talked of value addition and transformation through education. Once we do that and the common man can get transformed, then he concluded with the major thing, the structure of the economy. He said that people should not think that being in agriculture is something that must be very proud of as Ugandans. We must be in industries and in service. That is where we must schedule our people to be.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Dombo, Communications Director at the National Resistance Movement. Captain Francis Babu, many thanks for making it. Many thanks to you too. Honorable Fred Mukasa Mbidde for the perspective. What you've heard were reactions to the State of the Nation address.
This man had a honeymoon. He didn't tell us what happened.
Congratulations. We do not have the words to use to congratulate you, but I think the point is very much at home. Congratulations on your marriage. We hope you've just returned from the honeymoon.
Yes, I'm still in high spirits.
That will do it for this edition of Morning at NTV. It's been a pleasure having your company. Of course, more quality programming is coming your way on NTV. I'll see you tomorrow. Have yourselves a lovely day.